Stalking is one of the most terrifying forms of obsession. It is not only a violation of privacy, but a breach of trust, leaving emotional scars that are not easily erased. When someone becomes fixated on another person, the result can be a life turned upside down, a sense of fear and helplessness, and a haunting memory that lasts far longer than any physical encounter. In this article, we delve into 3 chilling stories of real-life stalking. These tales not only highlight the terrifying persistence of stalkers, but also the lasting emotional impact they have on their victims. Each story brings to light a unique experience of stalking, leaving us with important lessons about boundaries, trust, and personal safety. 1. The invisible threat. Sarah's story. Sarah had never imagined that a casual encounter at a party could lead to something so terrifying. It all started when she met Chris, a guy who seemed charming enough at first. They had a brief conversation, shared a few laughs, and exchanged contact information. The encounter was fleeting but pleasant, nothing out of the ordinary. Or so she thought. In the weeks that followed, Chris began reaching out to Sarah, sending her text messages and checking in to see how she was doing. At first, it seemed innocent enough. After all, they had exchanged numbers, and it was only natural for him to reach out. But what started as friendly messages soon escalated. Chris began texting her more often, sometimes several times a day. He would comment on her social media posts, even sending private messages that felt oddly personal, remarks about her appearance, her lifestyle, and her daily activities. Things no one could have known unless they were paying close attention. Sarah thought she was just being paranoid. Maybe she was overthinking it. Chris was a nice guy, after all, and she had no reason to believe he was anything other than someone interested in getting to know her better. But then the messages started becoming more frequent, and the tone shifted from friendly to possessive. One evening, after Sarah had gone out with friends, she received a message from Chris that made her blood run cold. It was a simple line, "I'm right outside your window. Just wanted to make sure you were safe." She didn't know how to respond. Was he joking? Was this a harmless message or something more sinister? Sarah didn't feel safe anymore. The message lingered in her mind, and soon she found herself becoming more and more cautious. She began locking her doors and windows, constantly looking over her shoulder when she went out. Her mind raced with worry. Was Chris really outside her window, watching her? The unease turned into outright fear when Chris began showing up unannounced at places Sarah frequented. It started small, accidental coincidences, he'd say. He'd run into her at coffee shops, grocery stores, and even in her neighborhood. His presence, though seemingly casual, left Sarah feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Each time he appeared, he seemed to be just a little too close, just a little too attentive. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was always watching her. The final straw came when Sarah received a message one night that said, "I know you're home. I've been waiting for you to respond." That was it. Sarah realized she could no longer ignore the growing sense of dread that had been building for weeks. She called her friend, then immediately contacted the authorities, who advised her to take the matter seriously. They suggested she change her number, install cameras around her property, and take steps to ensure her personal safety. Chris's stalking continued, but with more intensity. His messages became more aggressive, sometimes threatening, always manipulative. It wasn't just about love anymore. It was about control, obsession, and an utter disregard for Sarah's boundaries. He couldn't accept rejection, couldn't accept that she no longer wanted to engage with him. And the more she ignored him, the more desperate and intrusive he became. Eventually, after filing a restraining order, Sarah was able to regain some peace, but the psychological toll was immense. The constant fear, the self-doubt, and the overwhelming sense of powerlessness had left an indelible mark on her. The experience would forever shape the way she viewed relationships, trust, and personal boundaries. Sarah's story serves as a stark reminder of how important it is to trust your instincts and set boundaries early in any relationship. It's easy to brush off small red flags, but when something feels off, it's important to act. Reaching out for help and taking the necessary precautions can make all the difference. And remember, no one has the right to invade your personal space or demand your attention. 2. The obsession that wouldn't let go. Ethan's nightmare. Ethan had always considered himself a rational person. He was well aware of the boundaries in relationships and had always maintained a respectful distance, especially when things started to feel a little off. His relationship with Emily started like any other casual dates, long talks, and plenty of shared laughs. He had always been cautious, taking his time to get to know someone before letting them in. Emily was no different. She seemed sweet, attentive, and genuinely interested in him. She checked in on him, sent texts, and liked all his posts on social media. At first, Ethan thought it was just a part of the early stages of a relationship, the excitement, the thrill of getting to know someone new. However, things started to change after a few months. Ethan's initial excitement began to fade as he noticed Emily's behavior growing more controlling. At first, it was small things, insistent texts when he didn't reply within minutes, or comments on his social media that were too pointed, questioning why he hadn't responded to certain posts. She seemed to demand his time, even when he was busy with work or hanging out with friends. Her requests became more frequent, more urgent, as if he owed her his undivided attention. Ethan didn't think too much of it at first. He was, after all, just trying to keep the peace. But things escalated when Emily insisted that they share their locations with each other. She justified it as a way to keep in touch and to make sure that they were always safe. Ethan, feeling a mix of unease and obligation, reluctantly agreed. But this was just the beginning. The more they shared, the more Emily began to track his movements. She would text him when he was at work, questioning why he hadn't responded to her message earlier. When he was out with friends, she would ask why he was with them, demanding to know when he would be home. It was when Emily showed up at one of Ethan's hangouts that the situation became unbearable. Ethan had gone over to his friend Phil's house for a casual evening of hanging out. They were just talking, playing some video games, and enjoying each other's company. Everything seemed normal until Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Where are you? Why haven't you replied to my texts? I was waiting for you to come home." Before he could even respond, there was a knock at the door. Ethan opened it, expecting to find one of his friends, but instead, it was Emily. She stood there, her arms crossed, visibly upset. "Why haven't you been answering my texts? We were supposed to go to the winery tomorrow, and you're just ignoring me," she snapped. Ethan, embarrassed and caught off guard, tried to calm her down. But instead of understanding, Emily became louder, accusing him of ignoring her, of not caring enough about their relationship. Ethan's heart sank as she began to reprimand him in front of his friends, making him feel small, insignificant. He tried to ask if they could talk later, but she wouldn't hear of it. The confrontation continued, escalating to the point where he felt like he was being cornered in his own home. Ethan apologized to his friends, hoping to diffuse the tension, and left with Emily, feeling guilty and confused. As they drove home in silence, Ethan's mind raced. He had never seen Emily this upset, this controlling. He had to end things, but he was scared of her reaction. His decision to break up with her was not easy, but it felt like the only choice. He sent her a long message that night, telling her that he needed space, that they both needed time apart. The following day, things took a dangerous turn. Emily started texting him repeatedly, sending messages filled with anger and confusion. She couldn't understand why he was doing this. She couldn't understand why he was breaking up with her. Ethan didn't respond right away, afraid of what might happen if he did. Then the calls started. Over and over again, Emily called him, demanding to know where he was, why he was ignoring her. When he finally stopped answering, the situation took an even darker turn. He was sitting in his townhouse, thinking he was safe, when he heard a loud pounding at his front door. It was Emily. Her face was flushed with anger, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs. Ethan was terrified. The situation had gone from uncomfortable to outright dangerous. His neighbor, hearing the commotion, came outside and asked Emily what she was doing. Emily, furious, yelled at the neighbor and accused him of siding with Ethan. She refused to leave, forcing Ethan to retreat inside. Locking the door behind him, Ethan immediately blocked her number, but the fear didn't subside. The next few days were filled with an unsettling silence. That was until Ethan went out with friends again. It was a Friday night, and he was just unwinding when he returned home, feeling exhausted. But when he opened the door, something felt off. He heard a strange sound from the dining room, a clicking noise, like a door being opened. Fear surged through him as he cautiously made his way toward the sound. Was someone in his house? He grabbed the nearest object he could find, a kitchen knife, and dialed 911. His heart was pounding as he stepped closer to the dining room. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Emily, standing in the shadows, watching him. She was in his house, Ethan screamed, but Emily didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. Without thinking, he ran toward the door, bolting it shut behind him. He could hear her footsteps behind him, the sound of her chasing him down the hall. The police arrived just in time to stop her, but the damage had already been done. Ethan was shaken. This wasn't just a breakup gone wrong, it was a stalker's obsession. Emily's fixation on him had crossed every line, and there was no turning back. The emotional toll it took on Ethan was profound. What started as a normal relationship had morphed into a nightmare that he would never forget. Lesson learned. Ethan's story is a reminder that obsession can be subtle at first, even disguised as love. The signs are often easy to miss when you're caught up in the excitement of a new relationship. The emotional toll it took on Ethan was profound. What started as a normal relationship had morphed into a nightmare that he would never forget. Lesson learned. Ethan's story is a reminder that obsession can be subtle at first, even disguised as love. The signs are often easy to miss when you're caught up in the excitement of a new relationship. 3. The silent pursuit. Megan's haunting encounter. Megan had always prided herself on being independent. She wasn't easily rattled, and she never imagined she would find herself in a situation so terrifying that it would change the way she viewed the world forever. It all started in her quiet suburban neighborhood, where she lived alone in a modest home she had worked hard for. Megan was used to the solitude, enjoying her peaceful evenings and welcoming the comfort of routine. Little did she know that a seemingly innocent neighbor, a man who was always polite and unobtrusive, would soon turn her life into a waking nightmare. His name was Mark, and he lived a few houses down. At first, Megan didn't pay him much attention. He was just another face in the neighborhood, always nodding a friendly hello when they crossed paths. Nothing out of the ordinary. He was quiet, a bit reserved, and seemed harmless enough. Megan never thought to think twice about him. After all, he didn't appear to be the type who would invade someone's privacy. But over time, Megan began to notice things. Small, seemingly inconspicuous details that seemed to hint at something more sinister. He would be around whenever she was, and when she looked out her window, She would catch glimpses of him, standing by his own window, staring in her direction. At first, it could have been coincidence. But the more often it happened, the more unnerving it became. Megan tried to ignore it, brushing off the thoughts as paranoia. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Then came the gifts. They started with a single rose, left on her doorstep one chilly morning. Megan had no idea who it was from. There was no card, no indication of who had left it. She assumed it was just a harmless gesture, maybe a neighbor or an admirer, though she couldn't recall anyone expressing interest in her. But when another rose appeared the next week, and then another a few days later, Megan felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The roses had a sickly sweet smell, one that lingered too long in the air, clinging to her senses. It was as though they were following her, haunting her in every moment of quiet reflection. Still, Megan convinced herself it was harmless. Until one day, she received a note. "I'm always watching you. You'll never be alone. I'll always be here." The message struck her to her core. It wasn't just a note. It was a threat, a promise that no matter where she went, no matter how far she ran, he would always be there. Megan's heart raced, and a feeling of dread washed over her. Who was this person, and how had they gotten so close to her? How had they been watching her so intently without her even knowing? Megan tried to keep her head high, but the fear was slowly consuming her. She stopped walking alone in the neighborhood, opting instead to drive to nearby stores, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering if someone was watching her. She changed her routines, stopped answering the door unless she was expecting someone, and installed extra locks on all her windows. The once peaceful home she had created for herself now felt like a prison. The next escalation came when Megan found out just how far Mark's obsession had gone. She came home one afternoon to find a strange, almost surreal sight. Her front yard had been completely covered with hundreds of handwritten notes. Each one was a declaration of affection, a plea for Megan to acknowledge Mark's love for her. Some notes were polite, but others were deeply disturbing, expressing his belief that they were meant to be together, that she had been sending signals without even knowing it. In one of the notes, Mark had written, "I know you feel it too. We belong together. You're just too scared to admit it. I'll make you see the truth. I'll never leave." Megan was horrified. This wasn't just a neighbor with an infatuation. This was a man who believed he owned her, that she owed him something, that her silence meant agreement. The feeling of being trapped in her own home became unbearable. She felt his presence in the corners of her vision, felt his eyes on her at all hours of the day, lurking in the shadows just outside her reach. One evening, as Megan was sitting in her living room, a chill ran down her spine. She heard something faint, a light tapping sound coming from her window. When she turned to look, her heart stopped. There, outside her window, standing motionless in the dark, was Mark. He wasn't smiling or even attempting to speak. He was just standing there, his hands pressed against the glass, watching her. Panic set in, and Megan did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed her phone and called the police. She texted her friends and family, explaining what had just happened, though she knew the fear in her voice would never fully convey the terror she was feeling. The police arrived quickly, but Mark was gone by the time they arrived. They searched the area, but found no trace of him. It wasn't until later that night, when Megan went to bed, that the true horror revealed itself. As she lay in bed, trying to calm her racing thoughts, she heard the faintest noise, scratching, scraping. It was coming from the other side of her bedroom wall, just beneath the window. Megan's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what it was. Mark was on the outside of her house, trying to get in. She rushed to call 911 once again, but this time The police didn't just search the area, they found something terrifying. Mark had been trying to break into her home through a small window she had always kept unlocked for ventilation. He had been planning to enter her house while she slept. But the police were able to stop him before he could succeed, catching him just as he was about to pry the window open. The arrest was the final straw for Megan. The police had to remind her that Mark's behavior wasn't just strange, it was criminal. Megan, though shaken and deeply afraid, found solace in knowing that Mark was now in custody, facing charges for his stalking and attempted break-in. Megan took steps to protect herself in the aftermath. She moved to a new neighborhood, far from Mark, and made sure to install security systems in her new home. But the psychological scars remained. Megan's trust in others had been shattered, and she was forever changed by the experience. The fear, the anxiety, the constant paranoia that someone was watching her, it would never fully go away. Megan's story is a chilling reminder of how stalking can start as something small and seemingly innocent, but can quickly escalate into something much more dangerous. Trust your instincts and never ignore your gut feelings when it comes to your safety. Set boundaries early, and do not hesitate to call for help when those boundaries are crossed. Your safety is paramount, and it's okay to ask for support in protecting yourself. These 3 stories show how stalking can manifest in different ways through persistent texting, obsessive love, or terrifying acts of intrusion. But each of these individuals learned the hard way that when something doesn't feel right, it's important to take action immediately. Stalkers are often persistent and manipulative, using subtle tactics to invade your privacy and make you feel unsafe. It's important to recognize the signs early, trust your instincts, and protect your personal space, both physically and emotionally. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember, you are not alone. There are resources, legal protections, and support systems available to help you through these situations. Always prioritize your safety and never allow anyone to make you feel powerless. Reach out for help if you need it, and don't be afraid to speak up.